Hello, it's Charles Fockaert on January 11, 2018. I want to thank you for watching and subscribing and supporting this channel. I finished The Camp of the Saints a couple weeks ago, and then I've been wanting to write a book for a long time, a historical account. It'll have to be a historical fiction account of the Israelites having left Egypt prior to the Exodus. Now, I don't know if I'm ever going to get to do that. It's a lot of work to get a book like that written. I have my other book finished. Took me 6 years to finish that book. And but you know, I still want to do that. But I picked up this book by Ken Follett called The Fall of Giants. It's a first in a series of 3 about World War I, World War II, and beyond, involving Russia, Germany, England, and I think a couple other countries. And it's historical fiction. But I wanted to read these books by an author that is as good as Mr. Kenneth Follett. Not so much to read the story, but to take notes on how he tells his account. He tells the story and he builds the characters, and I wanted to read it and take notes on what he does and how he builds up the character. All right? So I'm not so much reading the book for the entertainment value, but even though it is, he's a good writer, and that's why I'm looking at him in this way. So I picked up the first book, like I said, and I read through it. And he leaves out a lot of information that is important in the first book concerning the Germans in World War I. And for instance, he forgets, or he doesn't mention anything about Woodrow Wilson being bribed by Brandes and Untermeyer to get the Americans into World War I. Not a word. Benjamin Friedman, in 1961 speech at the Willard Hotel in Washington, D.C., he brings that up. So now, knowing what Benjamin Friedman says, I'm looking at the other book here, Fall of Giants, and I go, hey, Mr. Ken, did you forget something there or what? So, or did Benjamin Friedman, did he tell us something that wasn't true? See? But you know what? The majority, 99% of the people who read these books, and they're New York Times best sellers, they're New York Times bestsellers. They don't know anything about Benjamin Friedman, so they just read these books by Ken Follett and others. I mentioned another book here about Iran back a couple, maybe last summer, about how the slick-looking dude in the sport coat, and he looks so cool, and he wrote a book about the Mossad and Iran and Israelis and how they're going to prevent Iran from getting the nuke. And it looks, and all the reviews by the Esau Edomites tell you, oh, it's so real life, it's so realistic, you think you're there. See, those are the kind of books that get printed and get promoted and become best sellers. And those are the books that are in the libraries all over the Western world, and you can't find a book by David Irving in the little bookstore the little library down here, can you? So back to my point, the only books that get published by a mainstream publisher, Esau Edomite publisher, are those who push the propaganda that the Esau Edomites want everybody to be fed. And this is no exception. And I wanted to bring up a point here, and then I'm going to mention Twitter here at the end, what's going on with Twitter, and connect the dots here. Inside of this book, on the frontispiece here, it says, the note by the publisher, this book is a work of fiction. names, characters, places, and incidents either are the product of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously, and any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, business establishments, events, or locales is entirely coincidental. So how many people actually read that? This is a work of fiction, but they get into it. People thinking, well, I'm going to read a book of history, and I'm going to learn history from a good author, and so when I talk to people like Charles Fockaert, and he tells me this, and then I can say, well, wait a minute, I read in Ken Follett's book that's not what happened, and you're full of shit, and you don't know what you're talking about. See, that's what happens. And these people are brainwashed by the movies, the books, the newspaper articles, and just bombarded repetition, which is what is to propaganda what location is to real estate. But I digress. So I'm reading this book, and I want to bring you to the page here where they talk about the Reichstag fire. So I'm reading from page 31, the first chapter, 1933. Hitler comes to power. He's just been elected as the Chancellor of Germany. And the fire there at the building, the Reichstag building. And here I'm going to jump in here at the middle. Sorry, I don't want to read the whole thing. You can pick up the book yourself if you want. Hitler was even more histrionic than Göring. "There will be no mercy now," he shrieked. He sounded as if he were addressing a stadium. "Anyone who stands in our way will be butchered." He trembled as he worked himself into a fury. "Every communist functionary will be shot where he is found. The communist deputies to the Reichstag must be hanged this very night." He looked as if he would burst. And it goes on from there. So, I doubt anybody knew what Hitler said, and if he said it in that way after the Reichstag fire. And then he goes on here to talk about the person they caught, and he was a construction worker, a Dutch construction worker in the Communist Party. And the book here says the fellow Lloyd saw that Hitler was determined to blame the communists regardless of the facts. Well, folks, there's still historians still debate who actually started the fire, and they pretty much agree that it was the Dutch communist worker. His name was Marinus van der Lubbe, but they don't agree on whether it was the Communist Party, because there was 3 other men that were caught and went to trial later. And you know what a trial is like in the judicial system. It's a farce. So, but the point is, Mr. Follett comes across like that's a historical fact that Hitler was going to blame the fire, the Reichstag fire, on the communists no matter the facts. See, and I can't wait to get my hands on a book by David Irving. I won't be able to get it at the library here, folks. I'll have to buy it myself, and but I'm going to look into that. I'm going to get a couple books by David Irving. Okay, so the point I want to make here is the propaganda is so overwhelming for so many years that when you start to talk with somebody, and I know many of you already are aware of this, so forgive me. I know I'm speaking to the choir, but a lot of people will come on to this video not knowing anything about this, and they'll hopefully learn something, and they won't just reject what's being said here out of hand. Okay, so a lot of people get their history from guys like Ken Follett, and they never even hear of, and they certainly don't read any books by David Irving and others. And then I want to tie this in with what I read this morning about what's going on at Twitter. So, before I do that, though, I have to I have to bring you a little bit further along in the book. Ken Follett portrays the Nazis, the brown shirts, as here in the next few pages. The Social Democratic Party are having a meeting prior to the election to approve the Enabling Act, and they take every step they can to prevent outsiders from coming in and interrupting the meeting. But somehow the brown shirts, the evil brown shirts, are able to break in, and they come in the side door, and they had a well plan, they said, and they interrupted the meeting, and they wouldn't let people speak, and they started to beat everybody up, and the evil brown shirts just wouldn't allow free speech. Now, I very much doubt that that's what happened. I believe, from what I understand, they broke up the communist meetings, not just the Social Democrats that just sitting there having a little meeting. They broke in it, and Ken Follett doesn't mention a single word about how the reason why the National Socialist Party had to institute or had to form the brown shirts. They had to form the brown shirts because it was the National Socialist Party that were getting together and having speeches, and the communists were coming in and using violence to break up the meetings that the National Socialists or the Nazis were having. So that's why the brown shirts came about, and there's not a word of it here by Mr. Follett, but he wants you to think that he's giving you an historical account. All righty? And most people will never see that, and that's what they say, the Nazis and the Jews, and how they're beating up the Jews for no reason whatsoever, and the communists are really only a small little part of it, you know. It's all lies by omission and lies by not telling the whole truth, and just outright lies. And I want to tie that in here because Twitter is been exposed by people that were working for Twitter, how conservative views are being shadow banned on Twitter. So hold on, I'm going to get that, and we're going to talk about that for a minute. So here it is. Undercover video, Twitter engineers to, quote, ban a way of talking through shadow banning. That's one reason I don't even spend any time at Twitter, because you don't know if you're not being engaged or nobody's seeing your post, and you only got a few, quote, followers. So, you know, what's the point? But the point I want to make here, I'm going to just read a little bit. Stephen Pierre, Twitter engineer, explains, quote, shadow banning says is going to ban a way of talking. Former Twitter software engineer, I can't pronounce his name, he's a third world Indian guy. Quote, they just think that no one is engaging with their content when in reality no one is seeing it. Former Twitter content review agent, another non-white name, explains the banning process. Quote, if it was a pro-Trump thing and I'm anti-Trump, I banned his whole account. It's at your discretion. The point is, the Esau Edomites now are doing exactly what Ken Follett is accusing the Nazis, the evil Nazis, of doing in 1933 and following, when the Nazis took over Germany. And today, we don't have to meet at a meeting. We can exchange ideas and the way of thinking and what we are thinking and facts and our point of view on social media, places like YouTube, etc. We don't have to get in a group meeting somewhere to hear what other people have to say, their ideas. And so the Esau Edomites control Google, YouTube, Twitter, and the rest of them. They're controlling what is being heard by the average individual who is on their platforms. See? So, one more time, Adolf Hitler and Goring and the rest of them are being accused by the likes of Ken Follett of banning and breaking up the Social Democratic Party and the rest of them from just having a peaceful little meeting, and they don't want the exchange of ideas, and which is most likely a lie. It was the communists they broke up. And another thing, Ken Follett doesn't talk about how most of the communists in pre-war or between the wars were Jewish. He doesn't mention that. He mentions the Jews. He has to, otherwise nobody's going to believe him. But he leaves out, but he lies by omission. So the Nazis, the evil Nazis, were actually doing what maybe we need to be doing here in this country. We need to be stopping the George Soros and the Zuckerbergs and the rest of them from spreading their lies, preventing the exchange of ideas, and they're doing, these Esau Edomites are doing exactly what they accuse the Nazis of doing in Germany. And the majority of the Americans and the majority of the Caucasian race, they don't get that. And these are the biggest hypocrites on the level playing earth, folks. And that was my point. I do want to thank you for watching. I want to thank you for subscribing, and I want to thank you for supporting this channel. And may the grace of God, our Father, Yahweh, the Creator, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may His grace be upon us all, for we certainly need it. See ya.
Bye. Christoph, let me ask you, why do you think that Truman has never come close to discovering the true nature of his world until now?
We accept the reality of the world with which we're presented. It's as simple as that.
The Hague for Christoph. Hello.